tell us about when you were promoted to Brigadier General?
Oh, that was a marvelous experience. I don't know whether being promoted to the general or becoming an Army Nurse Corps officer or the chief of the corps, I don't know which was more important, but becoming a general officer was totally unexpected. Now, legislation had been passed about 2.5 years prior to that time, and I had been assistant chief when it was passed. Excuse me. And it was when I was chief, waiting 2.5 years. We didn't know when it was going to happen. Of course, I didn't think it was ever going to happen. We were too busy to even think about it. But a year before I retired, that would be on the 11th of June, 1970, and I retired in 71 in September, is when I was promoted. And I was notified about a week before then, and went over to the Pentagon that day. It was really something. We met in the General Westmoreland's office. No, Chief of Staff's office, right. And the Chief of Staff was there, and people came from everywhere. All the big people, I didn't know them, of course. My family, which I was so glad, my brother and my sister, and their husband and wife. And so I remember going down the corridor with General Westmoreland, and he said, "I'm going to promote you first," because Colonel Hoisington was also promoted me after me. And he said, your insignia is in my right pocket. He said, "Don't let me forget that." And I remember that, just telling me that going down. And so then Secretary was Resor, R-E-S-O-R. And so he and General Westmoreland gave their speeches, and then I was promoted, and what a wonderful, wonderful time. And then I gave a speech, and I have it there, I think, in your papers, I think. But it was a wonderful day. It was a wonderful day. And after that, Mrs. Eisenhower was there, the previous chiefs. It was just unbelievable. And of course, not that I deserved it, but I was very happy to become a general officer.
You deserved it.
Oh, thank you.
You experienced treating soldiers in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. What were some of the significant changes in the way, a combination of techniques and technology between World War II and...
Vietnam was more advanced.
Much more advanced?
Oh, yes. And we got them right off the field. They still had their ammo on them when we got them, most of the times, especially in Saigon. We got them off from the Delta. They were covered with mud and slime. And we used to take a hose, a water hose, and wipe them off, clean them off, because you couldn't get near them. There was so much mud on them.
Yeah.
And one of the high-ranking officers from Washington was there one day. And she said, "Oh, my, do you have to use a hose?" So I was working in the triage center. I couldn't stand that office. I used to go and work, And I said to her, "Well, what would you suggest, Colonel?" "Oh, there must be something." I said, "Well, you go back to Washington and sit behind your nice little desk, and you dream of something and then notify us, and we'll do it." She said, "You're being sarcastic." I said, "Yes, I am." I said, "No, don't get too close, because you might get dirty."
But it was, things were really much improved.
Much improved. The hardest thing for the Americans were to learn was triage. Not to learn it, to practice it. Now, in our culture, you take care of the worst first.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do that. You take care of the walking wounded and the one that'll only require one doctor to take care of him in surgery. And that way they can get 20 or 30 done. And you leave the others beside, off, and you bolster them with fluid and pain medication. And then when the doctors get finished, they take them, because sometimes it'll take 2 or 3 to operate on one patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one kid, and I used to try to get the nurses, the boys that were that badly hurt, I would try to get I did something terrible. I used to get the kids that were pretty and made them use cologne and stuff and go in there and sit with them. Because I figured, at least let them, if they're going to die, let them see an American woman that smells good, So, and I used to go relieve them. So I went in one day and this little nurse says to me, "Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom, Colonel. I gotta go terrible." I said, "Go to the bathroom, sit down, take your time, have something to eat, and walk around a little bit." And I said, "I'll be here," because I had some paperwork to do. So I'm saying my rosary beads a lot. I used to carry them in my pocket. So I'm saying my rosary beads and sitting there, and this fella says to me, "What's that noise?" When you're dying or when you're that close to death, your hearing is more acute. I said to him, "I'm saying my rosary beads." He said, "You don't read, do you?" I said, "Why, he read very well, thank you." He said, "I'm Jewish." I said, "You believe in God?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Same guy." So we sat there for a while, and he was really abrupt. Well, he was dying, So pretty soon, the OR came in, and they said, "We're going to take him, Liv." I said, "Okay." So as I was getting up to leave, he said to me, "Let me have those beads. They may be lucky." I said, "Oh, they're more than luck." So I gave him the beads. And I chalked it up to another pair of rosary beads lost, because I lost a lot of them that way. So the next day I'm in the hall, and one of the nurses came along to me, and she said, "You know that last guy we took?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "He did better than the others. He's already gone to Japan." I said, "Isn't that marvelous?" I went from Vietnam to Fort Belvoir, which is a little Walter Reed. You got all the senators' wives and...
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, politicians.
Yeah, I knew Betty Ford was a drunk before anybody else did.
You did.
Yeah, I had her as a patient.
At Belvoir?
Uh-huh. So,
So you're saying you went there after Vietnam?
this fella, I was there about maybe a couple of months, and I got a package. I don't know how this guy found me, but it was a pair of rosary beads. And it said, "I'm keeping the others." So I'm home and retired now. This happened maybe 10 years ago. I get a phone call. I don't know how this guy finds me. He's in New York. He's the vice president of a bank. He said, "I just want you to know that in this ashtray on my desk is your rosary beads." And he said, "Nobody can figure that out." And he said, "And another thing, I just had a granddaughter born in Israel." And he said, "She's Liberty Ann." I said, "How could you do that to a kid?" He said, "I always talked about you, and my son wanted her name that."
On the ship? Oh, when we went under the Golden Gate Bridge, I thought, I don't think I made a good choice coming back in the Navy. I mean, all of us, including the doctors, we got sick.
Yeah.
I mean, I have never, ever had that feeling sick again. I've been sick, but it's the most god-awful feeling. And I thought, they said, you'll adjust, you'll adjust. But we had a ship's crew that took the ship.
Right.
And then we had the hospital crew. We had the nurses, we had the physicians, and we stopped in Hawaii and for a day or so, and then we were right on the line. We stopped in the Philippines, and then from the Philippines we headed right over to Vietnam. We were what they called the I Corps, which that didn't mean a lot to us, but till I got back home. But I thought, well, that's, whatever. I worked in Central Supply, and where you sterilize everything, and took the call and helped operating room. I was an OR nurse, but I had Central Supply, and we had an OR nurse and a nurse anesthetist, and the autoclave where you sterilize kept breaking down.
Mm.
So we had the chaplain come down every morning to pray over that. We had our jokes and our fun, and one of my corpsmen, he said, they call me Miss B. Miss B, you ought to get the chaplain down. Well, I said, well, we'll get the Protestant and the Catholic and whoever else is aboard, come down here and pray over this damn thing, It was pitiful. We really, to be honest, should not have really gone when we did. We left Hunters Point, and there was a lot. Now, the sanctuary came over a couple years later, the hospital ship. They were well equipped, running, organized. They rushed us over there. They said, you got to get on the line. You've got to get on the line. Because the Army was holding a lot of hospitals in country, like MASH and those things. And they said, you got to get on the line. And they realized, I guess, in '65 that maybe it's going to be a little bit longer war than they think. But in all honesty, we should have been more equipped, because when we'd ask for other instruments to be ordered, you may get them and you may not. You just, I don't hold a resentment, but it could have been done a little bit better, but maybe the government did not realize this is going to drag on for a while.
So Pat, was the ship, once you started accepting patients, was the ship continuously on the move?
I'll tell you what happened. We got all of our patients by helicopter.
Right.
And we were lit up like a Christmas tree. We had a red cross on it.
Right.
And I asked the commanding officer of the ship, I said, you think they'd ever blow us out of the water? He said, oh, yeah. The first casualty we got was Mike Neely. I remember his name. I was up at triage with Ted Wilson. He was the chief of surgery. And Mike had stepped on old Mother Hubbard, they called, and blew both legs off. And Chopper brought him in with a couple others, and they had belts around him to stop the bleeding, and got him down to the operating room. We must have poured 7, 8 pints of blood in him.
Ooh.
And we kept him till we stabilized him. And then they went to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. From there to Hawaii to Travis. And Oakland was the amputee center, Oakland Naval Hospital. And we got him stabilized and got him into intensive care, and he was saying, "Don't tell me my legs are gone. They're not." And we realized that once he got around others, and he was in shock. And some of the nurses keep in touch with him. Yeah, he's still going. He's in his wheelchair and doing his thing.
Good for him.
But you could tell at night if the ship was moving. That means we followed the war.
Yeah.
Wherever there was going to be a big confrontation or whatever, the ship knew ahead of time. We didn't, but we knew where we were headed.
And here we were off the coast of Vietnam the whole time. We would sail from Da Nang up to Phu Bai and back.
When was this? In 1965?
Man, I forget dates. It was
It
about
must have
that
been
time.
around that time.
Yeah, it should have been around that. Yeah, because I went to Pendleton from there, and I was in Pendleton from 68 to 75, I think, something like that.
Okay, so you were probably on the Sanctuary from 1967.
71 is when I arrived at the sanctuary.
71?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And was there, I was only aboard for 8, well, I was there, we were in Nam for 8 months at that point because they were bringing the ship back to the States. And I think I would like to have put in a full tour, of the 13 months, but wasn't to be.
Mhm.
And I got the shock of my life there when I was in the triage unit and they took this young soldier who was terribly wounded directly from triage into the operating room, boots and jackets and everything, because there was no way they could get him undressed until they had him under anesthesia. And I was, coming from nice, neat, clean, orderly operating rooms, I couldn't believe it. But, we took care of him. He got on one of the units and eventually was medevaced back home. But he lost an arm and a leg, and the wounds were just so awful there.
That was probably the hardest duty that you had.
I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I worked on the Vietnamese ward. We had Vietnamese women and children aboard the sanctuary. We did a lot of mitral valve surgeries on women.
Really?
We delivered a couple of babies. We treated a lot of people that had phosphorus burns. and that was really tough. We also had the problem that there was one woman that the other women thought might be VC, Viet Cong, and so we had to protect her from the other women. Anyway, I wanted to ride the ship back to the States when we came, but I was told I couldn't do that. But I said, well, I'll take leave time to do that. No, you can't do that. But I played cribbage with the executive officer of the ship. And he pulled some strings, and I got transferred from the hospital staff to the ship staff and got to ride back anyway.
Now, did you bring patients back as well?
No, we didn't.
You did not.
No. It was basically empty.
Mhm.
Just the ship's crew, a few corpsmen, myself. I think one of the doctors rode back with us.
So,
And I was the ranking new officer coming in, so I got first choice on base. And she says, Captain Allen, we would like to send you to the 3rd field. That's in Saigon. I said, do you wear white uniforms? She said, yeah. I said, I turn it down. She said, excuse me, how about the 17th? I said, is that another white uniform place? She said, yes. I said, ma'am, I really and truly did not come here to take care of officers. I don't have a problem with that, but that was not why I came. I have brothers who are military. So somebody being smart who knew more about the country than I did says, well, why don't we send it to Cu Chi? I never heard the word, of course. So Colonel just rears back, and I says, well, what's with Cu Chi? She says, Captain Allen, we just took it from under tent tops. And it's with the 25th Infantry, and it's our only hospital that sits on a base camp, and it sits on the tunnels of Cu Chi. I said, I'll take it. And she says, are you sure? I says, I didn't come to play. And they sent me out that afternoon. And then there was another young girl who came in with us. Her name is Frankie. And she was so scared. And she was a second lieutenant. And so she asked Colonel if she could go with me. And Colonel said, yeah, she could. So that she and I then, we were the first ones then out. And we went by combat loaded helicopter. Oh,
Yeah.
this is something. And we're flying over the forest, and this was really woods. You know, this is real woods, because Cu Chi was in the vicinity that the soldiers called the Iron Triangle. It was a rubber plantation, the Black Virgin Mountain. It was near Tay Ninh City, which is on the border of Cambodia. We talk a real war thing. And the door gunner, the young black kid, and he just wanted to talk, and I wanted to talk too. And he said, Captain, you see all those woods? I said, I sure do. He said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, we got this shit here called orange. And they put that shit on there, and tomorrow there won't be no leaves. I never ever figured out how that would play into my later life.
Yeah.
Because history will bear out. Cu Chi took more spray, Cu Chi province of Agent Orange, than any province in Vietnam. So, Cu Chi was something. I get there on Friday.
chief nurse says we'll be oriented to the bunkers and stuff on Monday. Well, we got mortared on Saturday.
What was that like? Tell us about that.
Well,
Is that your first experience with incoming?
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, it was my first day.
Okay.
Okay, this was my second day. Yeah, it was my first experience. Well, the hooches, that's what they're called, hooches, were laid out in a strange kind of way. And there were these things, sandbags. But I don't know I know it's a sandbag, but I don't know that's a bunker.
Yeah.
And then they're all fastened to the hooch. And there was a hooch for women.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a buildup happening in Kuchi province. This was like April of '66.
Okay.
And so the war was really starting to do its thing.
Yeah.
Because they had just, I found out later, dispatched the 173rd was coming into Kuchi at this time because it was a lot of battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were trying to get enough nurses in here, but they didn't have any space. Well, they made us a space in the kitchen. So it's real, it's happened. We were in the kitchen, so Frankie and I were in the same place. And trust me, it was not half this size. The space that we had cots. And she could sit on her cot and I could sit on my cot. And we could use the same mirror to put on makeup. Okay. We could not be in the same room while we were dressing because there was not enough space.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition, we were next to, I always called it the water room. That's where the shower was and where you washed out your uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
So there was lots of bugs. Lots of bugs. So on this night, since I don't know anything about the bunkers, and the bunkers, you had to come all the way through, so we were at the back of this place. So when the mortar started, there was, somebody yelled, incoming. Well, since me and Frankie don't know nothing about incoming, I don't understand quite what that means. So,
Not incoming
it was night. So we step out and somebody says to Frankie, come on, let's go. But nobody said anything to me. So I'm standing there frozen because now I don't know what to do. And I am the only African-American nurse there. So I figured I better figure out what to do, like real quick. So I follow everybody else out, and so we go in this bunker. And the floor of the bunker means dirt. It's lower. So, and then they have these sandbags around the side. And of course, again, I don't know what to do when we're in the dark. And so I just feel around the wall. I know other people are there and it's dark. And now my feet are on the floor. So I said, get your damn feet out there. Snakes in the water. Oh, Jesus. Here we go. Oh, man. But everything offers a learning experience. Everything offers a learning experience. One, I very quickly understood the sound of an incoming. Number two, I know nobody's going to come and get me, so you better figure out how to get the hell to where you got to go. And the third one is don't put your foot in the water.
And where exactly did you go?
I was on the hospital ship in Vietnam, and we'd rotate between Saigon, Chu Lai, and Dung Ho, different provinces of Vietnam. And the ship was like a floating hospital. And we had, our own nurses' quarters. We even had a small area where we had like a beauty salon, but no stylist. It was just like you could have a hair dryer and things like that. But it was on a hospital ship.
Do you remember arriving on the ship?
I do, very vividly. I had flown into the Philippines. I had flown from Ohio to San Francisco to Hawaii, and then into the Philippines. It was a very, very long flight. And I was very young and very frightened because I didn't know a whole lot about where I was going and everything. And I was sitting or standing, I don't know which, and somebody paged my name, and I thought, who could possibly know me here? I couldn't believe it. And it was another Navy nurse that was going to the ship, and she had seen me, and that's where we started our friendship.
What kind of jobs did you have as a nurse?
We did triage, where when the I don't want to call them victims, but when the casualties would come in, we'd have to decide where they should go, if they'd go to ICU. You would decide the acuity, the sickest, and a lot of times they were dead on arrival. And I did that. We all had to do that, rotate. I worked on a medical unit where we had a lot of malaria. And I worked on the orthopedic unit where we had a lot of amputees. And we also had a unit where we had Vietnamese children and women, which was rather confusing at times because we'd have a long hallway, and at the front part of the hallway would be the military men, and then we'd have the Vietnamese children and the wives. So I did a little bit of everything on the ship.
Did you see combat?
No, just results. Thank God. And when we were, once in a while, we'd sunbathe on the deck of the ship. And it would be like the 4th of July, and you knew that casualties were coming in, so you would hurry up and go down and get on your uniform and everything. But I didn't see combat at all.
Were there any casualties in your unit at all?
I saw a lot of casualties, a lot of people that had amputations by landmines, very, very sick people that had malaria, and it was amazing to me how fast they got well when they were in the right medications. It was just like overnight.
Well, anyway, back up to Vietnam. So what other things did you want to tell us about your duty there, or your
let's see.
memories?
Well, I was saying that we had a lot of children on the ward. Some of us patients, and some of them mother was hurt, and the kids came along. And we didn't have kids' clothes, of course, so we sent back home. Everybody wrote back home and asked things like Girl Scout troops or churches to send boxes of clothing, which they did, and then we were able to clothe people that are civilians that we had. Because mostly when they came in, their clothing had gotten cut off of them, and then they didn't have anything to wear when they left the hospital, so that was kind of nice. And we always thanked the Girl Scouts and the church groups that sent the things to us. That was very good. We did have a rocket explode right in the middle of the ward. That I might mention that the ward was shaped like an H. There was a Quonset hut here, Quonset hut here, and then a hallway that ran between it. The beds were in the Quonset hut, and the hallway was our supply area. And we had a rocket hit one morning very early right in the center of that hallway, and oxygen tanks exploded and glass bottles flew all over the place, and we had casualties, and one of the casualties was the nurse that was on duty, and her name was Sharon Lane, and she was the only nurse in Vietnam that was killed as the result of enemy action. Other nurses died of Jeep accidents or from illnesses or some other thing, but no one else died in the whole Vietnam War as a result of the enemy action, except Sharon Lane, and she was a co-worker of mine. And that was a very sad day. We also lost a couple of patients, and a lot of our patients were injured with shrapnel flying.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very, very tragic day. Let's see.
So this was just a random, I mean, just,
Yes.
were they picking on, obviously they must have been picking on a hospital if that's the only thing there.
Yes,
They
because
just-
earlier there had been another rocket hit in the compound, but it hit in the dental suite, and there was it was at night, and there was no one there at the time, so only a guard that was on duty got hit by a piece of flying shrapnel, but he wasn't badly injured, just a couple of stitches, and he was all right, but yeah. We had sandbag bunkers, of course, where we could go if there was an imminent attack that they would call for code red, and we would run and get into these bunkers. But when we were working and that happened, why we couldn't leave our patients, so we would get the patients at whatever we could, whoever we could, we got them on the floor and covered them over with mattresses. That was mostly just to protect them from flying shrapnel, not that it was going to save them from any bombs. And at one point then one of my Vietnamese helpers got under the bed and got her hair caught in the metal springs that were under the cot. And after the attack was over, I tried to come on, we got to get these patients back in the bed. And she couldn't move. She wouldn't come out. And I, what's the matter? Come on, you got to get out, help us. And then I got down on my knees and I looked, and here her hair was all caught up in this metal spring. So I took out my scissors and cut her hair off and said, come on, and then she had this little tuft of hair sticking off on the top of her head. That was kind of a funny little thing that happened, but she didn't like the idea that I'd cut her hair, but I liked the idea that she got moving. We did take care of a lot of Vietnamese. I don't know that everyone knows about it, but we had what we called MedCap, where our doctors and nurses and dentists and foremen, whenever they had any free time, they could volunteer to go on MedCap, and that went out into the villages and took medical care to people, the indigent people in the villages. And we would give immunizations to the children. We would take care of pregnant women, give them vitamins, things that they needed, and take care of minor things that we could do in an afternoon, perhaps, or a morning. And people would be lined up. Maybe there'd be 200 people lined up waiting for whatever little services we could give. And I volunteered for that quite a bit whenever I had a day off and wasn't swimming. And I always thought that the military should have gotten more credit for, people should know more about that they do things like that when they're in foreign lands.
Mm-hmm. Don't hear that in the media too much.
No, you don't.
And it goes for today.
And sometimes they'd see a child perhaps that had a cleft palate or crossed eyes or something, and then we'd take them back to the hospital with the parents' permission. And when the doctors had some free time, they'd try to correct those things as best they could with the facilities that we had. But I remember one night where a child had a club foot, and they were able to correct that. And the child certainly would have a better chance of being able to walk.
Mm-hmm. Then the Vietnamese people receptive to Americans, or to you, or to your experience?
They did, because they knew if they went to the Vietnamese hospital, they would probably die.
Mm-hmm.
And so they knew that at least they had a chance coming to the American Army Hospital. And they also got a clean bed and 3 meals a day and bathroom facilities, and it was pretty nice. So they let us do to them whatever we needed to do in order for them to try to get better, and they were very receptive.